I got a lot of pushback. We had a contract with Merck, and if we solve this problem, then it's going to change our trajectory. So I got some key board members and investors on board and raised enough money and built what we now call the puck. The first
Yeah,
iteration was kind of the size of a puck, like a
yeah,
hockey puck. So
like a
being
hockey puck.
the sports person I am, we were like, okay, code name the puck,
Yeah,
but the name stuck. Folks at Merck seem to like it. Folks at Estella seem to like it. So it is the Fizzle Edge puck.
I could see competitors knocking on the door and the client saying, "Do you guys have a puck?" And welcome to the Startup Innovators Podcast, where we look at some of the hottest companies on the planet. And today we've got a really exciting one and an incredible, fascinating story that I personally am excited to learn about. We've got Ben Davis, who's the co-founder and CEO of Phizzle, joining us today. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great, Tim. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. We were joking before, we're literally several blocks away in the same neighborhood. So we got a beautiful day in San Francisco and everybody's chipper and feeling great. So it's
Yes,
wonderful
we
to have
do.
you.
Yes, we do.
Well, Ben, I'd like to do an intro because not everybody's familiar with all the companies out there, and we're going to rock and roll. Ben Davis, you're the co-founder and CEO of Phizzle, a San Francisco-based tech company focused on digitizing and standardizing data generated by scientific instruments used in pharmaceutical manufacturing and other regulated environments. So what does that really mean? Fizzle builds technology that automatically collects and organizes data from scientific lab machines so that pharmaceutical companies can make drugs faster, more reliable, more accurate. And at my age, everybody I know is taking some drugs. So it's what's in them and where they come from, and difference between generic and how they're all made is kind of a big thing. You founded Fizzle in 2006 to build mobile marketing and fan engagement technology. Long cry from where we are today. Sports teams and broadcasters used it to let fans interact with campaigns through text messaging, mobile web, and displays inside of stadiums, which I was this weekend in one. But around 2018, you literally made a huge pivot, applying your technology to pharmaceutical manufacturing. As we said earlier, connecting scientific machines so their data can be automatically captured and brought into one system. Essentially an IoT or kind of Internet of Things platform for laboratory equipment and pharmaceutical manufacturing. Prior to Fizzle, you co-founded Pixium, a mobile gaming company that developed branded games for organizations that included ESPN during the early era of mobile phones. Pixium was acquired in 2005 by Win-Win Gaming. And then earlier in your career, you held enterprise technology roles at Xerox, Parametric Technology, and EMC before moving to the Silicon Valley in 1997. Ben also has a bachelor's in business from Walsh University and played professional basketball in Europe prior to launching a career in technology. That's a whole nother podcast. It's great to have you on the show, Ben.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
All right, well, let's start off. You moved to Silicon Valley in 1997, right, your first company, Pixium, in 2002. That period from 97 to 2002, a lot happened, including the dot-com boom and bust. And that period was either exciting for people or terrifying for future entrepreneurs. And of course, you kind of watched that and still decided to go forward and start something. What was it during that era as you observed? Was there, what any lessons you learned about starting a company from that? So many companies were started, raised a lot of capital, sometimes, in a bubble-esque environment, obviously. And then they were on the street, calling guys like me saying, "Hey, can you get me a job?" You observed all that, participated, and still decided to jump in the water. So what did you learn from the mistakes of others during that period?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So when I first moved to San Francisco, I started working for Parametric Technology, and I was selling CAD CAM computer aided engineering software. And after that, I went to EMC, where I was part of the internet division, where we were selling storage to these companies that were raising huge sums of money on crazy business plans. And so I was fortunate that I was not a .com, so to speak, but I was a technology provider helping these companies with scaling that would never ever come to fruition. So one of the things that really resonated with me was how willing VCs were were at investing so much money in ideas that really did not have a chance. And so, we're going back, 20 plus years ago. So we don't know what the future holds. And clearly AI is going to change everything. It's changing everything. And you could look at that time back then and have the same sort of feeling. Um,
Yeah.
I was fortunate to sit back and see the writing on the wall when companies had a 3-page business plan or executive summary and could raise $100 million before even lifting a finger. And so, it motivated me to want to create something that was real, tangible, and had a good chance of being a success. So, there was no real aha moment or anything like that, but just sitting back on the sidelines and seeing what was happening was really enlightening and motivated me to want to become an entrepreneur and start a business.
Yeah. Even in spite of everybody kind of raising the money and then seeing the whole thing collapse, you still like, hey, I'm still going to jump in and do it.
Absolutely. I mean, there was no question about it. Entrepreneurism is in my blood. My dad was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. And, I really had no choice.
Well, I love that. So you started Pixium. It was a mobile game company, but this was before smartphones and the App Store, all those things that all of our kids kind of grew up using. What did it look like building mobile software back then when you started the company?
It was really, really hard. It was so hard because there wasn't any set standard. So, you had like CDMA and GSM,
Yeah,
right? And each phone had different specs, as far as audio and video. So we literally had an office where we had hundreds of phones and, we had to configure the software for each individual phone and then go through testing processes. It
yeah,
was brutal. It was a nightmare, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun because we knew that the cell phone was going to be the future. And
yeah, yeah,
so, clearly gaming wasn't what it is today, but it still, was a big business. So
yeah.
marrying, the cell phone with games to me was a no-brainer.
Well, I think also kind of this IoT idea that you guys are using today at Fizzle. How do I take all these different devices, right? Call them a device, call them a piece of equipment, whatever you want, that are very different. How do I engineer those so somehow they can all work together or talk together? That sounds like that concept was being embedded kind of in the early days with you.
Yeah, it was from day one, it was all about data kind of for
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
personally. I was just like, wow, we're going to create I didn't even, back in the late 90s, I didn't know what artificial intelligence was, but I knew that data was going to be everything. I loved statistics in college, and so producing big numbers can lead to a lot of, predictive and preventive, business models and applications. And so I always knew that I would, kind of matriculate down a path that had something to do with
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And the sports side would make sense of getting into something that's somehow related to the sports industry, having been, a serious athlete growing up as well.
yeah, yeah. I love sports. It's in my blood. And sports fans are crazy. I mean, sports fans generate so much content and data.
Yeah.
The whole concept, was to capture a lot of data from sports fans. And, if we could figure out how to effectively capture and manage and analyze and use data from sports fans, then,
Yeah.
I figured we could we could do working in any industry.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. So you sold Pixium in about 3 years, and then you decided, okay, I'm going to keep on going. I have to. This is my life. And you decided to jump in and start Fizzle. What was the original idea behind the company?
So the original idea was to build a the end goal was a platform that would capture data, content produced by sports fans, utilize that data to gain insights on who the sports fan was. And then, with that data, with those insights, help the teams as well as their advertisers and sponsors to create better, more effective engagements that were relative, to each individual. So back in 2006, the iPhone hadn't even been launched yet, but we knew that cell phones would be really at the core of generating lots of data. The first phase of going into developing that kind of platform was mobile marketing. And so, text messaging had just really taken shape and was gaining a lot of momentum in terms of usage. So, we developed a mobile marketing platform, that had capabilities to um, take engagements and visualize those engagements in unique ways on jumbotrons, on digital signage, and even on television. So, we worked with all the major sports teams in the NBA and the NHL. But ultimately, the end goal was to get to what is now called CDP, Consumer Data Platform, which is a real big thing right now. We just were a little too early, and as you know, timing is everything. So
Yeah, yeah. So many of the big investors and really successful entrepreneurs I've talked to have said it's timing, and a lot of it comes down to luck, and luck is the timing side of it. You got to be a little bit lucky.
yeah.
So, one of the traits that as I've gone through and had so many podcasts with great entrepreneurs, one of the traits that we always hear them talking about, including the investors, is this concept around entrepreneurial courage. And that's the entrepreneurs sometimes making big, bold, life-threatening moves that are super unpopular at the time, and they're called crazy. It harkens back to me, as a diehard Netflix customer back in the day when you're getting your CDs in the mail every day, and they decided to go 100% streaming, and everybody said, "Are you nuts? You're gonna destroy this entire business that's humming along. You're gonna lose half your customers or a lot of your customers." And of course, we know they made the right bet in the future, and that's the way it turned out. Now, you kind of did something similar, the mother of all pivots. And from what I understand, you had a nice modest revenue run rate. You could have had a lifestyle business, and you decided, let's completely do a 180 switch and move away from everything that was happening with the current customer base in sports and go into pharmaceutical manufacturing in a highly regulated environment, which that alone is a moat that keeps out a lot of people. What on earth made you pick that industry and market and make that transition? And were you called crazy too?
Yeah, definitely. The I first of all, we've got some unbelievable engineering talent. I mean, I feel like our engineers, there's no one better. I mean, we've got some really, really smart people. And so the foundation of our technology allowed us to go in a lot of different directions. And that, like I said, is a testament to the people behind the development of that technology. But what happened is, to your point, we reached, we were generating close to $5 million a year in revenue, and we weren't going to get much bigger. There could have been some innovations that could have, pushed it a little bit, higher than that. It was clear that we weren't going to, go much beyond that revenue mark. So, being VC funded and not
Yeah.
wanting to fund a lifestyle business, I was encouraged to try some different things, and so those different things kind of took us off the path, and we started losing customers. We didn't have clear direction because we were just trying kind of different things, and we finally got to a point where we had to either make a big, bold shift and get into something that had some real potential or shut the company down. And so I had a good relationship with Cisco, and I was able to talk some colleagues at Cisco into utilizing our technology to fill some gaps in their IoT offering. And so Cisco, they went for it. We did a partnership with Cisco, and we got involved in some really interesting projects. We got involved in a project with the Department of Transportation, another one with Lockheed Martin, and then one with Merck. And so once we got involved with the project with Merck, I was like, wow, this could be really interesting. I mean, I couldn't believe it, but a lot of pharmaceutical manufacturers still use pen and paper, and they're still doing really important processes manually. And so I was like, wow, if we a platform that could address broadly anybody's workflows and processes, then just might be able to disrupt arguably one of the biggest industries in the world. So we put all of our eggs in one basket and focused on Merck. And here we are today.
Well, I mean, it's a regulated environment. I mean, these are the biggest companies in the world, right? So when you got Merck, was it then a point that was your anchor client? Then did you go to other ones and they said, oh, what are they doing for Merck? And then that's how the whole, you have to get that first big win in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you talk about making big shifts and making bold bets. So we worked extraordinarily hard to get our software into production at Merck, and we did that. But it wasn't smooth sailing at first. We actually had a lot of issues, not with our platform, but with other technologies that were negatively impacting our platform. So, we had to deal with Cisco, and we had to host our software on Cisco routers. And on the surface, you think, wow, that's great. Cisco's the biggest, best networking company in the world. They've got these industrial routers that have been in the market for so long. What could go wrong? Well, everything went wrong. Anytime there was an issue with the router, the network, any of their servers, firmware upgrades, on the instrument, on the router, on the network, it brought our platform down. So we got a lot of calls from Merck. They'd call us and say, your platform's not working. And we do our analysis, we do our root cause analysis work, and we'd say, there's nothing wrong with our platform, but maybe there's something wrong with the router or the network. So
Yeah.
we built a tool to constantly analyze what was happening in the environments that could impact our software, and we couldn't keep up with it. And so we finally came to the conclusion with Merck that the Cisco router wasn't the right environment, for our software. So together with Merck, we selected Supermicros, and they were better, but they weren't perfect. And so Merck was like, they knew that it wasn't innately our issue, but it
Yeah.
didn't matter because it was bringing our platform down. So we were faced with having to solve an IT problem in order to make our platform work. And so one of our engineers, Ryan Brady, was like, hey, what if we developed our own purpose built computer, that we could develop that could host our platform, could sit on the network, could sit in between scientific instruments and the network. And I was like, really? Develop hardware? And,
Yeah.
we are a software company. And I was like, you know what? If we can't solve this IT problem, then we are never going to make this work. So we made that big, bold shift and actually
Wow.
created the first purpose-built computer that sits in a gateway that is clean room compliant. And so now we are a hardware and software company.
I can imagine we talked a little bit earlier about you've raised a lot of capital. Was it 35 or 40 million, something like that? And I'd asked you the question, how much was post pivot? It was a large number, at least like 20 million plus. So when you went back to the VCs to talk about Fizzle 2.0 and say, I got a great idea. We're a software company, but now we're going to start building hardware. Were they like, come on, man, we're going to encourage you, as they said, to not go there.
Yeah, I got a lot of pushback, a lot of pushback, but I've got such a good relationship with my investors. I mean, they have stuck with me through thick and thin. They've stuck with me when they should not have. And so, we had a contract with Merck, and so I was like, if we solve this problem, then it's going to change our trajectory.
Yeah.
And so, I got some key board members and investors on board and raised enough money and built, what we now call the puck.
Wow. Interesting. The puck.
The puck.
What is puck? What does it mean? I'm thinking of a hockey puck, but
So
it's
when we
P-U-C-K,
first,
obviously.
I'll show you the first
Yeah.
iteration was this, right? And it's kind of the size of a puck, like a hockey puck. So
Like a
being
hockey puck.
the sports person I am, we were like, okay, code name internal to Fizzle is just the puck.
Yeah.
Well, what's now in production at Merck is the puck, but this version of the puck, which is a lot bigger. But the name stuck. Folks at Merck seem to like it. Folks at Estella seem to like it. So it is the Fizzle Edge Puck. This is an early prototype version, but that's how that came to be.
I can see competitors knocking on the door and saying, client saying, "Do you guys have a puck?" And they're like, "What the heck are you talking about?" Eventually, it becomes like a Kleenex, right? The
Yeah,
brand becomes the thing.
yeah.
Was COVID ironically a good time for you guys because of the need to accelerate production and gather so much data on all these experimental vaccines that were pushed through with the federal assistance?
It was absolutely instrumental because the industry figured out that they could develop drugs and vaccines faster than what they
Yeah,
had traditionally. And with that speed came the need of tighter controls around data integrity. And that's exactly the problem that we're solving. I know for a lot of people COVID was really a horrific time period, but for
yeah.
us it actually validated, the problem that we were trying to solve.
Yeah. So since, like myself, we're forbidden to walk around and go to gay park or do anything like that, you'll be able to grind it out and work on a big solution.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was, yeah. I mean, to your point, being in a regulated industry, it just makes everything that much harder.
For
But
sure.
on the flip side, once you're in
Yeah.
and you've got a validated solution and it's working, I mean, you're going to be there for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, picking an industry where there's a very high barrier to entry, if you're part of that small group that makes it's a huge moat that you're building around for yourself. And then those clients, you have the early advantage of working with these large companies and essentially keeping other people out, like with a puck or whatever moat you were creating at the time.
Yeah, yeah, timing is everything, and so, the opportunity to engage with Merck and build something from the ground up, and then to put it into production and learn from the good, the bad, and ugly, and, adjust accordingly, has enabled us to build a solution that is completely ironclad. I mean, we've faced every major problem and built our technology to address those challenges. So now when we're talking to other customers, we know exactly what they're going through, and we have solutions and technology to address all
Yeah.
those issues.
Well, I think it's really interesting as we've evolved over the past couple years, at least in the public domain, everything is changing very quickly around, AI. There's this concept of AI ready data. So I would think that the next moat is having it in a format where the AI can go in and actually, use that information in a way to be productive for your clients. Has that been another big thing that kind of came out of left field that was it's terrifying for some people, but it's like COVID, right? It's an opportunity for some from other companies.
Yeah, from day one, we have automated the labeling of data, right? And ensuring that data is well organized and structured. You know, way back 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, scientists spent most of their time organizing data.
Yeah.
So, you know, and so we wanted to ensure that the data that we captured and managed was ready for those applications.
Well, try to understand for the consumer standpoint. So, like, everybody, I'm middle aged, obviously. So, everybody I know or the majority of people I know who are 50 or over, they're taking some pharmaceutical drug for some health thing, or multiple ones. How does the whole everything that you're doing with this process with pharmaceutical manufacturers, how does that flow down to the consumer as a benefit? I mean, I think of studies they've done on generic drugs and are they really where do they fall in terms of the regulatory environment, within standards and how much out of the standard you allow? What is the benefit by providing more information quicker and faster in the pharmaceutical manufacturing process that actually makes these drugs potentially safer or better for consumers?
So one of the biggest challenges that pharma manufacturers have is when the FDA comes walking in your door and
Yeah.
wants to see a report, or they want to identify potential glitches in your processes or your systems. And if you can't readily address those, then you are susceptible to FDA violations. And
Yeah.
those violations are really expensive. And
Yeah.
so if you can eliminate, or I guess you can't completely eliminate, but if you can significantly decrease, the number of deviation reports or non-conformance reports, then drive the cost down, you're going to take pressure off of people to cut corners. Safety is in jeopardy when you are cutting corners. So, the value that we deliver is kind of twofold, right? So saving money can be passed down to people like you and I. We can't make drug developers reduce their costs, but if we can help them save, you know, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, then, there could be some incentive to reduce costs. And, like I said, when you take the pressure off of people because you're going to hit your timelines, you're going to, you've got your processes digitized and, you're not in jeopardy of getting flagged by the FDA, then you're going to be less likely to cut corners, which result in safety issues.
Yeah. I think it was Ronald Reagan said the most terrifying words a business person can ever hear is, I'm the federal government. I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
But again, that is the moat that you're creating going into a highly regulated environment, whether it's food or drugs or whatever it is, when it has to do with consumption issues, when people are putting something into their body, creating that moat is significant. So you kind of have to work with the government, get on the good side and understand how that works. And then you do have some protection you can build upon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. We haven't had any direct interactions with the FDA, but our customers do.
Yeah.
And you change the way you do things, then you've got to go through some pretty rigorous auditing scenarios, that the FDA has to come and look at.
So are you guys sticking with domestic manufacturers right now? Because obviously the technology could apply to anywhere, and some of the biggest drug companies in the world are overseas.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
are you looking at it? Are you starting with it with domestically and then going to migrate globally? Or, I mean, for some of these big companies, they are global companies. Doesn't matter where they are, right? You have to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a Japanese manufacturer as a customer. We've got a German manufacturer as a customer. In today's world, there are no geographical limitations.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we went in production with Merck, some of the first plants were in Europe, were in Ireland. So we're very comfortable working overseas.
Good thing they don't have to collect data from one area, manually write it down on a piece of fax, send the fax over. Wait, I mean, you just think about how did we ever do anything 25 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, I mean, companies still are using that thin thermal paper because some of the older scientific instruments prints the report, and then you've
Oh my
gotta take
gosh.
that report, you've gotta take the numbers and write it down. Sometimes it gets smudged,
Yeah.
so all kind of bad things can happen.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because early on with a company where you hit kind of a stagnant run rate and you figured that the growth is going to be limited here. And of course, we got venture money and they're always looking for the 10 or 100 bagger. They put that pressure on you to either go for the fences or go, that's the end of it. We move on to the next portfolio company. What is the potential now that you found this niche market with these gigantic clients that they have deep pockets and there is this moat built around it and you're there. What's the potential for the company? Revenue, ultimate valuation. Have you hit kind of a market where this could be maybe a unicorn or something along that line?
Yeah, I believe that that is the case, and so do my investors.
Yeah.
We have completely de-risked the opportunity. We've proven that our software solves major problems. We've proven that it's functional. So now, we've kind of entered into the execution stage,
Yeah.
so it's all about execution now.
Yeah. And I think one of the most promising areas of AI is going to be in medicine. And the ability to develop drugs at a rate that we've never seen before because the AI can run simulations ad infinitum, which means that pressure to have more drugs produced at a lower cost faster. It just seems like you're going to be a critical part of that ecosystem that's going to be on a growth trajectory in the future as well. Yeah,
Absolutely. It's the domino effect.
yeah,
It's coming. It's coming. But, at the same time, we are entering into probably the most exciting time period when it comes to health and wellness and drugs and vaccines. And cell gene therapy is changing everything, and personalized medicine is real.
yeah,
It's coming,
definitely.
and it's going to be the norm, very soon.
Yeah, I've listened to so many Peter Diamandis talks about the future, the moonshots related to medicine, and it is very, very exciting. It's something even as a layperson, it just kind of makes sense, right? I mean, the limitation may be the speed in which you can actually do clinical trials on actual human beings. I don't know if there's a way to circumvent that at some point, but that would be, I'd see as the constraint in terms of speed of development.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There's clearly still some things, some issues that need to be solved, but they're
yeah,
solvable. They're
yeah.
solved, and so gearing up for that is for us is exciting.
So you've raised a lot of money. The investor are excited. You think you found a great niche. You've de-risked it and found a great solution for clients. Do you have a need to raise a lot more capital moving out down the road, or you kind of got everything that you need at this point?
Potentially, it just really depends on what that hockey stick kind of growth curve looks like,
Yeah,
and where we are going to invest in that growth,
yeah.
So there's still some items that need to kind of be determined on what those needs are going to be. Um, but
Puck production is that one of them?
yeah, yeah, that's definitely one of the concerns that we're looking at is who is best equipped to develop hardware for us, and we've engaged a couple different manufacturers in the U.S.
Yeah,
So
I'm
we'll
surprised Cisco never reached down a little bit further and said, "Can we work on something together?"
yeah, well, you never know. They might, once they once they see how this plays out. So you never know.
One of the greatest moments of my life, I was at a conference with 1,000 people, and John Chambers, in his typical fashion, where he walks the room speaking, walked by, had a beautiful statement, and gently touched his hand upon my shoulder for about 5 seconds and walked away, and that was it.
He anointed you.
I was anointed. I don't know if we ever made eye contact, and he never followed up with me, which I found very upset about that. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, once
but it
you're
was
once
an
once you were knighted, what more do you need?
yeah, yeah, I wish it was the case. So what are the big milestones for you guys coming up you're trying to hit in the next couple of years to get to the next level?
Just really market share. We've got competitors, which is great. right? Because it validates the market. But we're all kind of going about solving these issues differently. And so for us, getting our pucks into production at as many global pharma manufacturers is really what we're trying to achieve in the very near future so that we can set a standard.
Mhm.
That's ultimately the goal, is to kind of be the lead in setting a standard. And that's realized by lots of big important customers utilizing your
What's the blowback when you go to someone? I mean, it sounds like it's a great pitch. I mean, what's the negative? Is it just the integration and dealing with such a sort of a large company and the bureaucracy?
Yeah, so I think for a lot of years, not a lot of years, but for like 4 years, right? So we in in July we will have been in production with Merck for 4 years.
Okay.
I think I think a lot of the industry thought that it was a fluke, because we only had Merck for
Mhm.
this time period. But the reality is that we were learning, we were developing, and we were adapting. We kind of did that, and we hit our aha moment about last year. And late last year is when we started acquiring more customers. So we've done that. We've have formalized really important partnerships, and we haven't made any announcements yet. We're going to,
Yeah.
start that process, probably at the end of this quarter or beginning of next quarter.
Awesome.
So I think once the industry understands what we're up to and who we're up to it with, then I
Yeah.
think we'll be looked at a little bit differently than we have in the past.
Well, that's really awesome. Well, I wish you guys so much success. This has been a lot of fun. I love the story. I think it's so funny because so many startup founders I've spoken to who've been very, very successful on my other podcast, but they have 4 or 5 different startups. The pivot thing is always a component of that, as is the luck issue. And the great ones, they never give up and they just kind of look for the next opportunity. And a lot of investors will say, who do early stage investors, A round, seed investors will say, it's more about investing in the entrepreneur than the idea because you don't know what's going to happen. I've had various podcast guests where COVID came in and almost wiped them off the face of this earth, right? Some did, some pivoted into like you did, completely different businesses. And that was the great discovery moving forward. So much of it is about agility. Running a recruiting firm for early stage people, we look for that as a key quality is creativity and agility and adaptability because you never really know what's going to happen. When you raise a bit of money, you have a 5-person team, you have an idea and you go to the market. Sometimes people have a product in search of a market instead of a market in search of a product, but investors have faith in the individual founder and that team that they will find a way to find that blue ocean. And this is an amazing story. I
Thank
don't
you.
know if you personally enjoy pharmaceutical manufacturing as much as sports, but sometimes you got to go where the money is in the
Well,
idea.
you know what? I hated science as a student in high school and college. I've
Yeah.
grown to love science, but I was a bad student, and this is the universe paying me back for that behavior.
Yeah, they say God gives you what you need, put you in the right direction. So we just accept our path and go with it. And it's really exciting. Really, I appreciate you and wish you on that breakout 2026. I'm
Thank
going to
you, Jeff.
wait to see Pfizer and all the AstraZeneca, all them coming on board saying, do you have a puck or not? And then we're ready to rock and roll for sure.
Thank you, Tim. It's
All right.
it's been great.
Then it's been awesome. Take care.
Thank you. You
Thanks.
too.
Thanks. The Startup Innovators podcast is provided by MatchStar Venture Search. If you are interested in any of our executive roles or need help sourcing world-class talent for your company, check out our website at matchstar.com.